Have you subscribed to the channel yet? Do it right now, thanks. The turning point. James had always been a patient man. He loved his wife, Emily, for her quirks and her passion. But in the past few months, things had taken a strange turn. She had become increasingly paranoid, convinced she was suffering from various undiagnosed illnesses. Every week, it was something new. First, a heart condition, then cancer, then something she'd read about on an obscure medical blog. And then there was the jealousy. It had started small, casual questions about who he was spending time with at work. But soon, she was calling his office to check if he had really arrived on time and left when he said he would. James suggested several times that maybe she should talk to someone, see a therapist or psychiatrist, but Emily would just brush it off, saying, "I don't need to shrink, James. I'm just more aware of the world now. It's a scary place, you know." Things escalated. Emily stopped cooking, stopped laughing, and worst of all, stopped talking to James the way she used to. Their physical closeness was gone too. She would sit on the far end of the couch, barely making eye contact, and anytime he asked her what was wrong, she would respond with the same flat tone, "Everything's fine, James." But it wasn't fine. The woman who once used to prepare his favorite lasagna every Sunday now ordered takeout without asking what he wanted. The woman who used to kiss him goodnight before bed now turned away with a brief goodnight. It wasn't just the emotional distance, it was the constant shift in her mood. One minute she'd be cold and detached, and the next she'd accuse him of hiding things. One evening, after another quiet dinner, James gently put his hand on hers and said, "Em, something's off. You need to see someone. I think it's important." Reluctantly, Emily agreed to visit a psychologist. The session seemed to help, at least on the surface. She was prescribed medication, and the psychologist hinted that it could be early signs of menopause. But that only seemed to give Emily a new focus, obsessing over whether or not she was hitting menopause. "Maybe it's just hormones," she'd mutter, almost to herself. Despite the new meds, her moods didn't stabilize. In fact, Emily seemed to become more erratic. Then one day, out of nowhere, she told James she was going to visit her sister, Claire, in a neighboring state. "It'll be good for me," she said. "I need some time away. You'll see, when I come back, I'll feel better." James wasn't thrilled but didn't protest. Maybe time away from their house from the tension would clear her mind. A week passed, then two. Emily's calls became less frequent. James chalked it up to her needing space, but one evening she finally called. "Hey, Em, how are things with Claire?" he asked, a small sense of relief in his voice. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I met someone," Emily finally said, her voice distant. James blinked, not sure he'd heard correctly. "Sorry, you what?" "I met someone, James. He's different. I didn't mean for this to happen, but we've been spending a lot of time together, and I think I'm in love with him." James stood frozen in the kitchen, the phone pressed to his ear as if it might help him understand the words better. "Well, that's a plot twist," he said, a weak attempt at humor to mask his shock. "I'm serious, James," Emily continued. "He's kind, understanding, and we just clicked. I think I need to be with him." James sighed, trying to wrap his head around what was happening. "So let me get this straight. You went to your sister's, and instead of getting your head on straight, you found yourself a new guy. Is that the menopause talking, or did I miss something?" "I do make a joke of this," Emily snapped. "This isn't funny, James. This is my life." "Yeah, but it's our asterisk life too, remember. We've now mortgaged 2 cars and 12 years of marriage. You can't just meet someone and decide it's over. That's not how this works, Em." There was another pause on her end. "I didn't plan for this, James. It just happened. I didn't expect it." James ran his hand through his hair, trying to suppress the rising tide of anger. "All right, look, why would you come home? And we'll talk about this like adults. You know, the kind that don't just run off and find new boyfriends while they're supposed to be visiting your sister." Emily hesitated. "I don't think I can come back, James. Not like this." James' heart sank. The woman he loved was not the same anymore, and for the first time, he felt a cold certainty that there was no going back. "Fine," he said, his voice flat. "You do whatever you need to, Em, but don't expect me to be here waiting when you figure out that the grass isn't as green as you think." Weeks turned into months. James filed for divorce, though it was one of the hardest things he had ever done. He still loved Emily, but he couldn't fight her battles for her, not when she didn't even know who she was anymore. He later found out that the guy she left him for was a fleeting infatuation, nothing more. Emily had returned to her sister's after it fell apart, but by then, James had moved on. The last time they spoke, she apologized, her voice fragile and full of regret. "I'm sorry for everything, James. I didn't mean for things to go this way." "I know, Em," he said softly. But sometimes things fall apart, and maybe that's okay. And as he hung up the phone, James realized something. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't bitter. He had simply learned to let go. Psychologist's take. After everything that happened, James couldn't help but wonder if Emily's breakdown and erratic behavior were connected to something deeper. A few months after their last conversation, he contacted her psychologist to gain some insight. The psychologist explained that Emily's condition could very well have been a result of hormonal changes associated with early menopause or perimenopause, which can lead to heightened anxiety, mood swings, paranoia, and even a distorted sense of reality. It's not uncommon, the psychologist said, for people undergoing these changes to experience drastic emotional shifts. Hormonal imbalances can sometimes cause or exacerbate psychological symptoms such as depression, obsessive thoughts, or irrational fears, including jealousy. Unfortunately, Emily's refusal to fully accept her need for help or proper medication likely contributed to her rapid emotional deterioration. If she'd continued consistent treatment, the psychologist continued, there's a strong chance her behavior could have stabilized. But as James reflected on everything, he realized that while hormonal issues might have been a trigger, the deeper problem was the distance Emily had created between them. He had tried to help, but in the end, she was the only one who could fix what was broken within her. Reader comments. Len M. *, wow, this was an emotional roller coaster. I felt so bad for James. It's crazy how mental health and hormonal issues can completely shift someone's personality. At Tom78, the humor was subtle, but so needed in the middle of the chaos. James trying to joke while everything falls apart felt so real. Psyche Obsessed, this story highlights how important it is to deal with mental health and hormonal imbalances head-on. Emily obviously needed help, but the denial destroyed everything. Very powerful. Sarah, I didn't expect the story to take such a turn. Poor James trying to make it work while his wife spiraled. The ending gave me closure though. Sometimes you just have to let go.